Thanks, David. Steve Lamb, alcoholic. It's good to be here. It's good to be sober. If you're new, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And my sobriety date is July 27th, 1996. And I want to start out by basically saying that I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hope you find that you come to love Alcoholics Anonymous too. If you're relatively new, I will tell you that's not what it was like when I was new. I did not love Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't love you. You weren't really fond of me. It was a rather uncomfortable stage, that early sobriety. And as I've said to many people, I'm not an authority in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't appointed or anointed. I'm just the guy who's going to share his experience with you tonight. It may or may not match your experience. If it doesn't match your experience, I hope you go to another meeting so you can identify with somebody that's in Alcoholics Anonymous with us, because that's so critical to not just having membership, but becoming connected and being a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think one of the problems, perhaps with all people, but certainly with alcoholics in my variety, is this overwhelming feeling of separation. The 12 and 12 calls it anxious apartness on page 57. It's the grand illusion of all alcoholics. It's not true, it's not real, but it feels real. And it's essentially my ego trying to separate me and me from God, which is impossible, but I try nonetheless. And when I got here on July 27th, 1996, I'd been I'd been caught. I got a DUI, and I got sentenced to go to 6 AA meetings in 6 months. This is back in 1996, and I didn't want to go to AA. I didn't want to get sober. I didn't want to stay sober, and so I resisted. I learned over time that resistance, if you're an alcoholic of my variety, is futile. But I persisted, and I waited. I went about 5 months, so I got to do 6 AA meetings in 1 month, which was overwhelming to me because I'm new and I'm just yeah, I don't know, delusional. It's like I'm thinking, oh my God, that's more than one a week. I don't know how I can do that. I got a complex set of social issues. I can't possibly do that. And I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous, and I came here, and I didn't want to be here. And I remember my first meeting. I get there, and I'm late, and I go through these two double doors, and I walk in, and there's a there's a coffee making machine on the right, and there's not supposed to be a chair there. There's a chair there that morning. Normally there's a trash can, but there was a chair there, and I walked in, and the meeting was going on, and I made a quick assessment. So I sat in that chair, the farthest chair from you that I could possibly be in. And I looked at you, and you looked at me, and many of you looked at me, and you waved at me like, "Come on in, come on in." And I'm like, "No, that ain't gonna happen. I'm not, I'm not going, and you can't make me." And I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting. I'm looking around, and that particular morning, they did birthdays. And on the East Coast, you guys call them anniversaries, but on the West Coast, we call them birthdays. And so they're talking about how there's going to be a birthday, and a guy like David is going to give somebody. We'll call him Jerry. Jerry's going to take a cake for some period of years. So they're looking around. I'm looking around, and they're all kind of excited about this. There's a little hush, and they're going to do this birthday, and and David gets up to light the birthday cake, but he doesn't have a birthday cake. He has an inverted styrofoam cup with a candle on it that he lights, and he walks down the aisle like it's the Olympic torch. Everybody's excited. I'm looking around. This is not a birthday cake. I mean, it's not even a pastry. I mean, this is ridiculous, right? But everybody's excited, and David's excited, and Jerry's excited, and then they blow out the candle. They sing "Happy Birthday" out of key, which is apparently required in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then Jerry blows out the candle, and he starts telling his story. He starts telling us stuff, what he was like, what happened, and what he's like now. And he's talking about what he was like, and it's like we shouldn't talk about this is bad. This is crazy, man. And I'm looking around like you guys are nuts. And I'm new, and I'm tired. I'm pooped. I've been out there for a long time, and And I figure, oh man, I don't want to be here. I got to do 5 more meetings after this one is over, and I'll just take a nap, right? So I'm in a folding metal chair next to this coffee making machine. It's kind of canted to one side. I got my eyes shut. I'm trying to just kind of take a nap, right? And they're counting on people to share. They're sharing, right? They're sharing. They're telling their stories, and I learned later that we're a society of storytellers. It's how we heal. It's how we get recovery and keep recovery. But I don't know. I'm new. I don't know what this. And they called on a guy named Dick and Dick Dolmage. He died with 15 years of sobriety. He was a sweet guy. He helped a lot of people, to include me. But I didn't much care for Dick for quite some time when I was new. And Dick was a retired fire captain. He was slightly deaf. And he was totally lit up for Alcoholics Anonymous. He shared the same way every morning, but I didn't know that because I'm new. And they called on Dick. He's a little deaf, and he goes, "Hi, my name's Dick, and I'm an alcoholic." He just yells it, right? So I'm kind of startled, and I almost fell off my chair, and I reached out and I grabbed a hold of the coffee making machine. Well, that's hot. That's hot. That's not good. And I'm like, oh man, I'm going like this, and you're looking at me, and I'm looking at you, and you're like, hey, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm thinking, yeah, screw you. I mean, I don't want to be here, right? And so the meeting's finally over, and they said we're going to say a prayer. I'm like, okay, I've been to church. I can do this. We'll say a prayer, right? So we go to say a prayer, right? And I stand up, and the guy next to me, he grabs me by the hand. So now I'm holding hands with these two. I don't know these guys, but now they're apparently my two best friends, right? And we said a prayer, and I just wanted it to be over. I don't remember what the prayer was. I don't know if it was the Lord's Prayer, the Serenity Prayer. We could have sung Kumbaya. I just wanted it to be over. And then they said the prayer. Somebody said Amen. So I go to let go, right? Like catch and release, right? No, not in Southern California. Now we're holding hands, and they start swinging my hands up in the air and chanting, "Keep coming back. It works if you work it." And I think, okay, I have died and gone to Huckleberry Hill. I don't know what the hell's going on here, but I can't do this. I don't know what this is, but I'm not doing it, right? So I go to leave, and I don't, they got a literature guy. He's blocking the door. And he's like, hey, do you have a meeting directory? Like, no, I don't need one of those. Do you have a phone list? No, I don't. I'm not calling anybody. He goes, hey, do you have a big book? And this is our program of recovery. He shows me the big book. I'm thinking it's not even that big. It's not a big book is like a coffee table book with pictures and stuff. Looks like a regular book. And then he goes, hey, do you have a sponsor? I'm like, dude, I don't watch NASCAR. I don't have a sponsor. I'm like out of here. And I'm convinced I'm never coming back, right? And I got to tell you, if you're new, I was at that meeting almost every morning for about a year. And I would like to tell you that my journey of recovery started then, but like I said, I resist. It didn't happen. It didn't happen for me. But I'm going to meetings because I realize you're telling me my story. Your story is my story. It's about the inability to control and enjoy your drink, and I got it. I got it. I'm the guy. My wife sends me out to get milk. It's not complicated. It's a really simple task. There's like two or three parts. You got to leave the house. You got to go to the store. You got to buy the milk, and then this is the kicker. You got to come home with the milk. And I do everything but I just can't come home with the milk. I run into David, and he seems like a nice guy, but he's the kind of guy. He asked me, "Do you want to have a beer, Leo?" Of course I want. It's like a basic food group. You can't get in trouble for having a beer, right? So I have a beer, and the allergy kicks in, right? I need more. So I'm drinking beer. I want to get there. I don't even know where there is, but I want to get there, and I want to get there now. So I start drinking beer and shooting tequila, and I pass out, and I come to about 3 days later. And I'm so delusional. I'm thinking, well, hmm, I gotta go get the milk. So I run to the store, I get the milk, and I come home and I show my milk. I show my wife the milk. I'm like, because I'm all proud, right? Because I've accomplished this seemingly impossible task. She is not impressed. She is like seriously pissed off because it's been 3 days. But I'm alcoholic. I don't know. I don't understand what the problem is. I just got milk. I mean, I did what you asked me to do. What's the problem? Everybody's pissed off at me and my drinking, and I don't understand it. But I realize I gotta stop drinking. And I'm going to meetings, and I'm under the impression that if I just don't drink and I go to meetings, I'll get better. And that's not my story. I'm going to meetings, sometimes 2, 3 meetings a day, and I'm getting progressively worse. And I realize looking back on it that I'm suffering from untreated alcoholism. Or probably more accurately, you are suffering from my untreated alcoholism because the book talks about being restless, irritable, and discontent. I am just perpetually pissed off. I am angry. I'm angry at everything. I'm coming into the meetings. The old timers are looking at me and they're like, Lamb, just sit down. Try not to cause a commotion. And for God's sakes, don't talk to any newcomers because they still have hope. I mean, it was awful. It was brutal, and I didn't understand it because I thought I should be getting better. I'm getting worse. I went about 100 days stark raving sober. I went on a business trip. I had a meltdown. I come back, I come back to Los Angeles. I was in Pittsburgh. I come back from Los Angeles, and I get up the next morning, and I've developed a newcomer plan. And I've learned over time, because I sponsor quite a few guys, that all newcomers have plans. And all newcomers, to include myself, we think the plan is brilliant because it's my plan, right? It's a good plan, right? And my plan was I'd been in the Army for 13 and a half years. I'd gone through airborne school. I went through Ranger school. I went through selection and assessment. I was a Green Beret for a while. They wound up sending me to law school. When I got out of the Army in 1993, I was a JAG. I was working in the Pentagon. My job was I was the intelligence oversight advisor for the United States Army, which should concern you. Not you Canadians. You Canadians don't care, but the Americans would. You should be concerned. This is a security problem, right? I mean, I had a TSSCI clearance. I worked in a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. I traveled all over the world on blanket travel orders, and I coordinated with uh, with various people in the special mission units and intelligence support activities, things like that, and I had gone on a trip and I'd come back and I'm turning in my travel vouchers. I'm turning in my travel vouchers at the Pentagon, and the clerk says to me, she says, "Oh, I see you were in the Philippines. What were you doing in the Philippines?" And I didn't skip a beat. I told her, I said, "I can't tell you that. That's classified." And I walked away and I thought, "Oh, what was I doing in the Philippines?" Because I remember going to Thailand. I had a reason to go to Thailand. But it's like the milk, man. I was in the Philippines. I see the vouchers. I was there for a couple of days. I'm sure I had a good time, but I had no recollection of it. So I resigned my commission. I'd gotten promoted early to major. Everything was going well, and I quit because I knew I'm going to get caught, right? So I leave and I wind up get a job I'm working as a trial lawyer at a international law firm, big firm, and I'm having this meltdown, and I come back from this business trip, and I was I my plan was I was gonna leave. I was gonna go to Costa Rica. I had some former Army associates that were doing some marketing and distribution in Costa Rica. And I thought this is a business opportunity, right? So that's what I'm going to do. And I got a wife, I got a daughter, and I didn't think about them because it has nothing to do with them, right? So I'm going to leave, and I had these passports, and it was crazy. And I the passports that I had my photograph, different names, different countries, and they were all current. They had not expired, but my tourist passport, my blue tourist passport, had expired, so I couldn't execute this brilliant plan that I had, this newcomer plan. And I found out later that it's 1996. I could have gone to Canada on my driver's license and then used the other passports, but I'm so befuddled. I couldn't even think straight. So I went to a meeting and I see this guy. He wound up being my grand sponsor without my permission, a guy named Jim. And he was talking about sponsorship. And I learned later this isn't exactly what he said, but what I heard was if you don't get a sponsor, you're going to die. And I thought, oh man, and so I went up to Jim after the meeting and I said, Jim, I've been around for about 100 days. I think it's time that I should interview for a sponsor. Because I'd heard people say, if you want what we have, find somebody that has what you want and ask them to sponsor you. So but I got a complex set of social issues. I can't just, I got to interview, I got to get the right guy, right? So I'm explaining this to Jim, right? Very carefully. And Jim is looking at me like I'm nuts, which I don't understand. Jim is like, my God, you are pathetic. And he grabs me by the shoulder. He introduced me to a guy. He takes me outside. He introduced me to a guy I've never met before. He says, Michael, this is Steve. Steve, Michael, sponsor, sponsee, go with God. And he walks away laughing. And I'm thinking, this is not funny. I don't know this guy. He's younger than me. I don't know this guy. And Michael's not skipping a beat. He's all excited. He's got a piece of paper. He writes his name and his address on it. He says, "You got a big book?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you have a 12 and 12?" "Oh, yeah." He goes, "Good. You're going to need them both. Be at my house Monday night, 6:30. I want you to read the first chapter in the 12 and 12 about step one. And then I want you to read the first part of the big book from the very beginning through the doctor's opinion. Highlight what you agree with, what you disagree with. Write in the margins. We're gonna work through this book, and then we're gonna talk about it." Oh God! All right. So I do the assignment. I get there. I show up, and first thing he does is starts telling me a little bit about his story. Because, like I said, we're a society storytellers. I don't know why he's telling me this, but it's like, all right, whatever. And then we get done, and then he says, "All right, pick up your book and start reading. Pick up your big book." I'm like, "No, I did what you asked me to do. I've got this assignment. I've got some highlighting. I've got some questions. I think I can clarify a few things because I'm a jackass. I don't know." He's like, "No, no, no. That's not what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to read the book. We're going to go page by page, line by line, word for word through the whole book. We're going to go through the whole book that way." Well, this is a level of lameness that I was not prepared for. I'm like, oh my God, right? But I've been beaten into a state of reasonableness. I got nothing. I got nothing. So I figure, all right, I'll read with the guy. And I'm so delusional and I'm so judgmental. I thought, clearly my sponsor's stupid. I bet he can't even read, right? But I thought, man, I can read. I'll help the guy out, right? I found out later he's got a master's degree in nuclear engineering. He reads real good. That's not the problem. That's not why he was doing this, but I don't know what's going on. And what happened was we went through the book, and when we got to a prayer, we said the prayer, we got to a step, we worked the step. It changed my life. It transformed me. I'm still stunned by it. I'm befuddled by it. It wasn't the plan. I'd read the steps before, and I thought, God, these are kind of stupid. They're kind of facile. They're shallow. I don't know what. My experience with the steps is that if you do the work will do you. I had a real bad attitude, as you can tell when I got here. Attitude is optional. Um, if you do the work, you'll have the experience. You'll be transformed, and it's. And my experience with this is the late great Sandy Beach used to say, if you've done this, if you've had this experience, you can't not do it. You can't not pass it on. But I didn't realize that when I was new. So we go through this process, and I remember we got to the fourth step, because I never had a problem with one, two, and three. I'm powerless over alcohol. My life's unmanageable. God, all right. Can a power greater than myself restore me to sanity? I agree it's possible. Highly unlikely, but it's possible. I'll give you that. And have I made a decision? I asked him, have I made a decision in step three? He goes, well, when you start writing the inventory, that shows you've made a decision. You're going to make this decision your whole life. You're going to turn it over forever. It's going to go on forever. But this is a good start. If you start right. So I write this. Yeah, I got this inventory, and I look at it. It's on page 65, and he says to me, he says, "You see these three columns?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You notice anything about these?" I said, "No, not really." He goes, "Well, take another look." Okay. What do you think? Mr. Brown's a jackass. Somebody needs to tighten him up. He's like, "No, that's not what we're talking." He says, "Do you notice that if you look at the columns, there's not even complete sentences. They're kind of like bullet points, right?" I'm like, yeah, okay. So really what we're going to do is we're going to identify the person, the institution, or the principle. That's the first column that you're resentful at. It's the two or three words. That's all it takes. The second column is the cause. 2 or 3 words. That's all it takes. The third column is how it affects you or the condition. Is it self-esteem, pocketbook, ambitions, personal relations, sex relations? Just not these. He just wrote these things down. And he says there's not a fourth column, but on page 67, it says we're going to turn back to our list. We're going to look at mistake, fault, and blame. We call these character defects. These are things like selfishness, self-centeredness, dishonesty. There are things like the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, fear. These are the things you're going to put down. And then he gives me the instruction on the fear inventory, on the sexual misconduct inventory. It says it should take you 2 or 3 weeks. I think it took me 5 or 6 weeks. It took me 2 or 3 weeks to think about it and 2 or 3 weeks to do it because, like the book says, it's simple but not easy. The simple part's the written instructions. The not easy part is me and my ego, which tries to separate me from God and from you. And I finally get this done, and I show up, and I got this inventory, and I'm reading the inventory, and the first guy on the inventory is my father, right? And I write down that I'm resentful at my father, and the cause is he deserted me, 2 words. The third column is, what does it affect? Everything: self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, personal relations, sex relations. I mean, it's a five-bagger. It's a big deal. And I identify in column 4 in the character defects that anger, fear, and I write down that I'm unwilling to forgive my father. I'd seen on page 67, it's sometimes referred to as a prayer to the sick man. Am I willing and able to ask God to help me to show this person that I resent, in this case, my father, patience, pity, tolerance? Am I willing to forgive him? Like, no. So I read this to Michael, and he stops me. I didn't realize it's going to be an iterative process. He's like, okay, I want to make sure I understand this. You're resentful at your father, right? Yeah. He goes, he deserted you when you were a young boy. Yeah. And you've got some residual anger. You got a lot of fear, and you don't want to forgive your father, right? Like, yeah, it's not going to happen. I've read ahead. I know there's an 8. It's not going to happen. He's all right. Look, we're just doing the inventory, and we're doing the fifth step now, but we're going to get to that later. He goes, but I have a question. You remember you had those passports, and you were going to go to Costa Rica, and you got a wife and a daughter, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, you weren't planning on taking them with you, were you? I'm like, uh, no. And he goes, well, so basically what you're telling me is that what you planned on doing is essentially what your father did. So you planned on deserting your family, and your father just actually did it, right? I'm like, well, I mean, if you look at it that way, because I can't look at it that way. And that's why in step 5, we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Because I can't see it. I can't see it. I'm like, oh, man. So now, basically I've become my father. This is not good news. And, I don't want to make amends. He tells me we'll get to it later. And I'm like, all right. He goes, so now I got to get quiet. I got to review what I've done. I've got to do 6 and 7. I've got to do 8 and 9. And I look on page 76 in step 8. It says we have a list of the people we've harmed. We made it when we did inventory. So I'm a lawyer. I'm a little sneaky little bastard, right? So I just took his ass off the list, right? I take my dad off the list because I mean I'm not putting him on the list. I'm not going to make amends to him. That's not going to happen, right? So I got this list, and I go see my sponsor, and he wants to see the list because I don't know why, but he doesn't trust me, right? So I show him the list, and he says, "Your father's not on the list." I said, "Laggy, I told you he wasn't going to be on the list." He goes, "Well, do you think you're any better than your father?" I'm like, "No, I got that. I got it." He goes, "Well, what do you think about the Lord's Prayer?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "What do you think of the Lord's Prayer?" I said, "That's a perfectly good prayer. We say it a lot at the end of the meeting. I don't have a problem with the Lord's Prayer." He goes, "Well, what about that clause that goes like this? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." What do you think of that? Look, I think it's a damn trick question. I understand. I understand this is a spiritual principle. I got it. I got it. He goes, "Well, are you willing to do it?" No. He goes, "Well, are you willing to pray for the willingness?" And that's like 6 and 8. Sure. I don't know if I'll mean it, but I'll do it. He goes, "Okay, you pray, we'll pray, right? But now you got to start making amends." So I start paying, I'm paying back the money. I'm making other amends. I made amends to my wife. I'm back in the big bed. I don't quite have the crossover privileges that I think I deserve, but that's a whole nother issue. I'm not going to talk about that today. And I start sponsoring guys, right? And I'm taking them through the steps, and they're getting sober. They got other guys that they're getting sober. I got this whole merry band of miscreants, and a bunch of guys are sober, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm doing 10, 11, and 12. I'm trying to do this, it talks about continuing, continue, continue, continue. It seems excessive because it never ends. And so I'm doing that. I'm praying, I'm meditating. I don't even know what I'm praying and meditating to, but I'm trying to carry the message. I'm trying to practice the principles, but I am not making amends to my father. And I'm talking to my sponsor pretty regularly, and he's asking me, how are things going? Yeah, okay. Because have you been praying and meditating and asking God for guidance about your father? Yeah. Well, what's coming to you? Nothing. Not a thing. I'm good. He goes, well, keep at it. He's all right. So, and he's like, God is old and slow. He doesn't wear a wristwatch. You got to be patient. You got to listen. You got to wait. And so you pray, I'll pray. We'll both pray, right? Yeah, okay, cool. We're praying, right? This goes on for a few years. And after a few years, I'm explaining to my sponsor that I am not going to be at my home group, which is Hermosa Beach Men's Stag. And it meets on Monday nights, and I'm not going to be there because I have to go up to Anchorage, Alaska. I have to do some depositions because I have to get ready for this trial. There's going to be some experts. I got to depose them. I'll be gone for a few days. I'll be back at the end of the week. Michael lights up like a Christmas tree. He's all excited. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. He's excited. This is great. You will make amends to your father. And I had forgotten that I had just mentioned to Michael that my father lived in Wasilla, Alaska, which was about 30 miles outside of Anchorage. So now my sponsor is connecting two clearly unrelated dots. And I'm explaining to him, look, hey, hey, whoa, whoa. You don't understand. This is business. This has nothing to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. And he leans in, he goes, oh, Lamb, what you don't understand is everything has everything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. You just don't realize it, and you haven't demonstrated it yet. Are you willing to take some actions? I'm like, well, I don't know. What do you got in mind? He goes, I want you to call your father. Oh, God. So I call my father. He says he'll see me. I call Michael, and I'm like, all right. I called him. Um, what do I do? He goes, I don't know. I don't know going up. I'm not going up there. Talk to God. I'm like, oh man, you're killing me. I used to call him the cosmic cupcake, the mystic muffin. Didn't matter what the problem was. He would say, pray and meditate, ask for guidance and direction, and the answer will come. Oh God, whatever. So I'm flying up to Anchorage. I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. I'm talking to God. God is not talking back. I'm like, all right, big guy, anytime you're ready. I'm just, and I got nothing, right? I've got nothing. So I get up there but I've made a commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I show up and I see my father. He's older than I remember. He's shorter than I remembered. And he's clearly uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. And I got up to him and I'm thinking, I got to say something, but I couldn't think of anything. So I just grabbed my father and I hugged him, and he buried his head in my shoulder, and he cried and I cried, and forgiveness happened. All I do is show up and get out of the way. I didn't I couldn't really understand this. I really couldn't understand this. And it was kind of it was an amazing thing. You can't really orchestrate it, you can't design it, you can't plan it. But if you're open and you wait for a little divine intervention and sometimes a pretty good sponsor assist, these things can happen. And so a father was restored to a son and a son to a father, and that's AA. And it's not like we had a perfect relationship, but I no longer hated my father. And he'd been down to see me. I'd been up to see him. I knew his stepwife, my stepmother, Lian Thong, and my half sister Peck. I'd met him, and yeah, everything was okay. And I'd experienced forgiveness, and I know forgiveness is so important. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we talk a lot about acceptance. Dr. Paul used to talk about it. He wrote about it. Acceptance was the answer. And what Dr. Paul told me once was that it can be the answer, but sometimes it can be overstated. That acceptance is important, but that's kind of like the first phase. If you don't have forgiveness, Sandy used to talk about this. Sandy Beach used to talk about the importance of forgiveness, and the 12 and 12 talks about it. But it's hard because it takes divine intervention. And like I said, usually with a sponsor assist. But if you have that experience, it's a really revelatory experience because it's something that's not expected, and the relief is tremendous. It's an amazing thing, and I know that I've experienced this forgiveness, and I know that I'm able to transmit it because 9 years ago in 2016 I got shot, and I've been shot before. I was shot when I was in the military once, 1983. I was in Beirut, but I just got clipped. I just got, you know, it was a mere flesh wound, as my team sergeant liked to say. But this time it was pretty significant. I was up in Badger, California, Sequoia National Forest, beautiful area, and I was at the Seven Circles Retreat Center. A beautiful area. It's a two-story cabin. I'm in the ground floor, and there's a guy above me and he decides it's a good time to clear his Glock 9mm weapon, which is ordinarily not a problem, but he missed a really critical step. He forgot to remove the magazine. So when he pulled the slide back, he actually jacked around. He chambered around. He went to clear the weapon. He was above me. He pulled the trigger. It went through the ceiling above me and it entered my chest right here. And I will tell you that this will get your attention. And we talk about this is a serenity improvement group, and I'm a fan of serenity. Spiritual, it's a really big deal. But I got to tell you, the first words out of my mouth were I yelped a shortened version of fire truck, and I grabbed a towel and I put it on because I'm stopping the bleeding. And the guy from upstairs comes running downstairs and he goes, "What happened?" Like, all right, Captain Obvious, you shot me. That's what happened. And this guy starts freaking out. He is absolutely freaking out because he's just shot somebody, bleeding. He doesn't know if I'm going to die. He's probably concerned with some potential criminal liability because he just shot somebody. And I'm doing something that still amazes me. I'm immediately trying to calm him down. I'm telling him it's going to be okay. I go right from acceptance right into forgiveness. And again, this is not planned. This is something that happened to me and through me because of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I have been shot, right? So I got to go to the hospital. We go down the hill in Visalia to go to Kauai Medical Center, and there's a emergency room. There's a nurse there, and I got this towel, bloody towel. She says, "Can I help you?" I'm thinking it's kind of obvious, but I said, "I've been shot." Now, when you tell them you've been shot, you go right to the head of the list, right? I mean, there's other people in the emergency room. There's some broken bones and some, but they got a crash cart. There's like, I don't know, 12, 13 people working on me. They do an overhead x-ray. There's a cardiothoracic surgeon. He comes downstairs and they see the x-ray, and the surgeon looks at it and he says, "Oh God, this round, it missed your heart and all your major arteries by like millimeters. This is bizarre." And the bullet is actually, it's lodged in your sternum. It's behind your sternum and it's not moving. The bleeding has stopped. So we're going to observe you for a couple of days, but then we're going to cut you loose. But we noticed that when we did the EKG that you've got this atrial flutter, which is like AFib because your heart is spasming from the shot. And so you're going to need some treatment, maybe some medication or some kind of medical treatment. But you'll see a doctor when you go down south. I said, okay. I get released. I come to my local areas at Torrance Memorial Medical Center. I see Dr. Carlson. He does an EKG and he confirms. He says, "Yeah, you've got an atrial flutter." And he goes, in the movies where they take the paddles and they shock you with the paddles." Yeah." He goes, "Well, that's barbaric. We would never do that with you. What we're going to do with you, we're going to take these pads. They're going to tape them to your chest, and they'll be hooked to some leads attached to some electrodes. And what we'll do is we're gonna hit you with a jolt of electricity that will stop your heart. We're going to wait 5 to 7 seconds, and then we're going to hit you with another jolt of electricity. That'll restart your heart, and hopefully it'll be in sync." And I'm like, "Hey, doc, I'm not that quick on the uptake, but that sounds like you're going to kill me." And he's like, "Oh, no, no, no. We don't look at it that way. It's a control procedure. I've done it many, many times. I'll be in the hospital. You'll be with me. And by the way, before the procedure occurs, an anesthesiologist will come in and give you something to make you comfortable." So I'm an alcoholic. I go from you're going to kill me too. I'm going to get comfortable. And it's not that I haven't been comfortable before I came into AA, but this happened as coming up on 20 years of sobriety when I got shot. And, I haven't been that kind of comfortable in, I don't know, 22, 23 years, right? And I talked to my sponsor. It's like a free pass. Okay, we're good. I'm ready. I show up at the hospital. I got the gown on. My butt's hanging out. I got the pads on, the electrodes. I got an IV in. And Dr. Carlson's there, and the anesthesiologist walks in, and he's got a syringe of comfortable. And he's talking to me, right? And we're having a conversation. And then next thing I know, I'm looking around, and Dr. Carlson says to me, he says, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "I'm good." He goes, "Well, how do you feel?" I said, "I feel fine. I'm ready, doc. Let's go ahead and do the procedure." He goes, "No, no, no. We did the procedure. The procedure over. We think it went okay." I'm looking around. I don't see Dr. Comfortable, right? And I'm like, "Hey, what the hell? You told me I was good. Where's the guy? Where's the guy?" Right? And because I am arguing now with my cardiologist about general anesthesia. Uh, and the youngsters won't understand this, but the old people, and I don't mean to be rude, but I've looked at the Hollywood squares here. There are some of you got sober in the Paleolithic era of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you'll remember that back then, they would tell you like my old grand sponsor Scott Redmond used to talk about 99. They'd tell you they give you general anesthesia. They'd tell you count back from 99. You'd go 99, 98, 97. So I'm waiting for 99. I'm waiting, right? Yeah, it didn't happen. They gave me this stuff called propofol. Same stuff they gave Michael Jackson. They just gave me the correct dose. The problem with propofol is you're here and then you're here. There's no there. There's no 99. It's really disappointing, actually. I would go so far as to say it's bad dope. It's bad dope, right? But that's not the point of this story. The point of the story really is about it's it's really about the process of amends, and it's about forgiveness. But I got to tell you, the crazy thing about this is, like I said, I was at the Seven Circles Retreat Center. So I'm up in Badger, California. Um, I was on a retreat. I was leading the retreat. You're not supposed to get shot on a retreat. If you're leading the retreat, you're not supposed to get shot, right? But here's the best part. The guy that shot me, I sponsor him. I sponsored him then, and I sponsor him now. He made a pretty good mistake. I've made mistakes. I screwed up before I got sober, after I got sober. The reality is if you've been around a while and you're an alcoholic, there's a mess on aisle 11, alcoholic inaction, and that's where you learn forgiveness. And that's where you practice the steps. And so I had a tremendous forgiveness experience, and it's really impacted me. But I got to tell you, the other thing I want to say about this, about my father, when I made amends to my father, I made more formal amends. And I asked him if there's anything I could do, anything he needed to tell me. I did kind of the standard stuff you hear about, and he did not make amends to me. Didn't have to. He's not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And I felt pretty good about that. But my father died a few years ago, and he had congestive heart failure. It was during the COVID period. So he was in the hospital, but he was not in the COVID ward. He nobody could go see him. I couldn't go see him. Leanthon couldn't go see him. Peck couldn't go see him. But we had taught him how to do FaceTime. But he's like 88 years old. So we taught him how to do FaceTime. When you do FaceTime, you got to talk to the phone. You got to look at the phone, right? But he's old and he can't hear very well. So he's a little deaf. So he would hold the phone up to his ear. So I would have these conversations with my father's extraordinarily hairy ear. And the ladies won't understand this, but the guys, when you get to be about 60, this stuff grows everywhere. It's like you need a weed whacker to get rid of this stuff, right? And so I'm having this conversation, with my father's hairy ear, and he made amends. He made amends. And before you get real excited, it wasn't a very good amends. I mean, if I had sponsored him and given him specific direction like we do in the book, I mean, I'd have told him some things, but he didn't do that. That's okay. You know, it's my father, and he made amends, and a father was restored to his son, and a son to a father, and that's Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought that that was the end of the story. And one of the things that I've learned about Alcoholics Anonymous and the stories that we have in AA is that a lot of times my perception of what happened is not really what happened. There's some other stuff. When my father died, he was buried in Arlington, which in the United States is a big deal. I was in the Army for 13 and a half years, and I got some decorations and some awards. I got a Bronze Star, but I would never be qualified to be in Arlington. But my father had a Silver Star, he had a Distinguished Flying Cross, he had an Air Medal, he had everything except a Congressional Medal of Honor. And he's going to be buried in Arlington. So I go to the ceremony, and they have the beautiful caisson, and they got they're wearing their blues, and it was really impressive. And one of the things that they did was they read some of the citations that my father had earned. And one of the citations that they read was about a guy named Bill Buckley, and how Bill Buckley in Vietnam in the late 1960s, Bill was in special forces. He was an A-team leader, and he came under fire. His whole team came under fire, and they had to be exfiltrated. They had to be exfiltrated, and my father was flying a Twin Otter at the time, which is a small STOL aircraft, and he basically landed on a rice paddy ditch, which is almost virtually impossible. And he did this three times, and he got his entire team out, and they were kind of shot up. But my father saved Bill Buckley's life. And I'm listening to this, and I mean, I can't even breathe because I knew Bill Buckley. I had no idea that my father had done this. Basically, and I knew Bill Buckley because in 1983, when I was in Special Forces and I had an A team, I worked with Bill because Bill was the CIA station chief at the time. And I left October 20th, 1983, 3 days before the BLT, the beach landing team, the Marine beach landing team blew up. And and about a month after that, Bill was captured by the Hezbollah, and he was tortured brutally, and he was murdered. He died. Bill died there. And while I served with Bill, with the CIA station chief, I did a number of operations with Bill, and Bill saved my life. Bill saved my life, and my dad saved Bill's life. So, we think we know the story, and not always, not always. And if you've been around a while and you're still kicking the tires, I encourage you to join us. Come all the way in, sit all the way down, like Ralph says, and you're with us now. And if you're new, you may be thinking, "Oh man, I don't know if I want to be with us," because we're pretty weird. We are, and so are you. So welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I got to tell you, this is you won't be bored. You won't be bored. You may be annoyed and pissed off from time to time, but you won't be bored. And I'll tell you what my sponsor told me. I was complaining one time about the 10th step, like, oh my God, is this never going to end? And he said, Lamb, there's good news and bad news. He said, the bad news is it never ends. I'm like, oh God, what's the good news, Michael? He goes, well, the good news is the same as the bad news. It never ends. There's always something to do. And this is Alcoholics Anonymous. More importantly, there's somebody to do it with. I hope you find that guy. I love you guys. Have a great evening. Thanks.